I'm Christopher Warnock of Renaissance Astrology, and today I'd like to talk about almutens. So when you're doing traditional astrology and you run across a name or terminology that begins with AL, you can almost be sure that it comes from Arabic, and almutens are no exception. Almuten is a Latin form of the word almutens, which means the victorious, and it indicates a ruling planet in essential dignity for a particular degree. So normally when we look at almutens, again we're going back to Arabic astrology. It's a technique that is frequently used in Arabic astrology, and they use it in all sorts of different contexts. Arabic astrology was developed by Arabic-speaking astrologers, often Christian, Jewish, or Persian, in the 9th and 10th centuries from a synthesis of Hellenistic, Persian, and Vedic astrology. That astrology then diffused into Europe in the 11th, 12th, and 13th centuries. And it's very complex, very nuanced. When it got to medieval Europe, it was simplified a certain amount, and then Renaissance astrology is even more simplified. Nevertheless, Renaissance astrology is still much more complex and nuanced than modern astrology, which is why it's such an excellent methodology for making prediction. So the almuten technique is one that's used frequently in Arabic astrology, though not so much in traditional astrology. But we need to understand it and use it. So basically, one of the most used types of almuten is the almuten of a house. Now, if we're going to determine the sign of the house ruler, our normal technique would be to look at the sign on the cusp. The cusp is the degree on the border, and you can see 14 Scorpio here is right on the cusp of the first house, the ascendant. So we normally would look at Scorpio and say, oh, well, the sign ruler of Scorpio is Mars, so Mars is the ruler of the first house. For almutens, what we're going to do is look at the 14 Scorpio at that degree, and then add up the essential dignity scores for the planets at that degree. Now, we're not looking at any planets actually in that sign in this chart. We're not concerned about that. We're not concerned about aspects or house placement. As long as it's a day chart or a night chart, because of the difference in triplicity rulerships, the almuten is going to be exactly the same. So any day chart with 14 Scorpio will have exactly the same almuten. Okay? So the almuten is the one with the highest essential dignity score at that degree. So let's walk through the calculation for 14 Scorpio, and that'll give us a better idea of how to determine almutens. Okay, so in order to do this, you need to have an understanding of the essential dignity systems. So if you don't understand that, you need to go back and get up to speed on the essential dignities. And they are sign, exaltation, triplicity, term, face are the essential dignities, and the essential disabilities are detriment and fall. So each of those has a different point, either plus for the dignities or minus for the essential disabilities. So Scorpio, Mars is the ruler of Scorpio, the sign. So sign ruler gets +5. So he's going to get +5 at that degree. There's no exaltation ruler of Scorpio, so no one gets the +4 dignity for exaltation. I use the Dorothean triplicities, which have a day, a night, and a mixed ruler. Now, we're going to treat this as a Hori chart, and for Hori charts, I just give the day ruler by day +3, or night ruler by night. So in this chart, the day ruler of a water sign like Scorpio is going to be Venus, so Venus will get +3. Okay, so the next essential dignity is term, and that's less than an entire degree. So for that, I almost always have to look at a chart or a table here. Now if we look at Scorpio here, and we walk over to 15 Scorpio, we can see that Venus rules from 14 to 20 degrees of Scorpio. So Venus is the term ruler of 14 Scorpio. And then the final dignity, and term gets +2. The final dignity is face, and the 15 is the second face of Scorpio, which is the Sun, so the Sun gets +1. So let's sort of recap that. Scorpio, Mars is the sign ruler, gets +5, no exaltation ruler. Day triplicity ruler is Venus, who gets +3. The term ruler is Venus, who gets +2. The face ruler is the Sun, who gets +1. And then we look at essential debilities. Venus is in detriment, so she gets -5. And there's no planet in fall in Scorpio, and a planet that's in fall would get -5. So then what we do is we add these scores up for each planet. Okay, we don't add different planet scores together. We just look at one particular planet and see what its dignity or debility is. So Mars only rules a sign and has no other dignity or debility. He's +5, so you can see that. Venus is interesting because she's got multiple dignities and debilities. So she's +3 for triplicity, +2 for term, so it's +5, and then in detriment -5, so she's overall 0. Okay, and the Sun is +1. So comparing all these scores, Mars has the highest and is +5. So you can see that's how you come up with an almuten for the degree. And notice that we're not looking at the planets in that degree in the chart. We're not looking at aspects or house placement or anything other than just the essential dignities. And we also look at accidental dignities. We're not looking at retrogradation. We're not looking at combustion or anything like that. Just essential dignity and debility. Okay, so that's interesting. Let's look at another degree that's going to give us some more insight into some other issues with almutens. So we're just going to make, just so for illustrative purposes, we're going to make 22 Aries rising. You can see that the Sun is still above the western horizon here, so it hasn't set yet. It's still a day chart. Okay, so for Aries, Mars is also the sign ruler, so he's +5. Now, in Aries, the Sun is exalted, so the Sun gets +4. It's a fire sign, so Sun is the day triplicity rulership, and he gets +3. Okay, let's look at the term here. So Aries term 22 is ruled by Mars because Mars rules from 21 to 25, so +2. And then the third face of Aries is Venus +1. So let's recap that. Mars is +5 for sign rulership, Sun exalted +4, day triplicity ruler +3, Mars is the term ruler +2, face ruler is Venus +1, and then Venus is detriment -5. So again, for each planet, let's add up their scores. Mars is +5 and +2, so +7. Sun is +4 and +3, so also +7. Venus is +1 and -5, -4 overall. So Mars and the Sun are tied for the highest score. Now in that circumstance, that means for 22 Aries by day, there are 2 almutens. They're co-almutens. And it's, I believe, technically possible to have up to 3 for a degree. But normally it's going to be 1. It's not unusual to have 2. You might even once in a while have a 3. So that gives you a really good idea of how to determine almutens of a particular degree. Now almutens are used in many different ways in Arabic astrology, and again what you're doing is you're looking over a particular degree or a particular set of degrees or points and then adding up and subtracting the scores. Usually, sometimes it's just adding, but normally it's adding and subtracting to get the overall score. And let's give another example of that. The almuten figuris. The almuten figuris is the chart ruler, and this Solar Fire, the software, is using the Ibn Ezra formula, which looks at a whole variety of different points. It's very complicated, and then adds those up and subtracts and determines the overall ruler of the chart. Now, very interestingly, with 22 Aries rising by day, there are 3 almuten figuris. And also, there's other things that come into consideration too, as far as planetary hour and things. But for this particular chart, there's 3 planets that have an equal score for almuten figuris: Jupiter, Venus, and the Moon. So, if this was a natal chart, for example, I would actually be looking at those 3 planets as co-almuten figuris, and that would give me some very useful information about the person who was born at this particular time, date, and place. So I hope that you found that illuminating. That's an introduction to the almuten, which is a fascinating and useful technique in Arabic and traditional astrology.